Hello, people of the internet and around the planet. Welcome back to the League of Ireland Roundup. Now let's unpack the weekend's events club by club. Don't worry if I don't spend too much time on your club. I only have so much time, and your club will be in the spotlight eventually. I mean, there's only 19, technically 20 clubs in the country, so I have to talk about yours eventually. Talking first division, firstly, Cabinteely fucked up my predictions with a strong win over Bray Wanderers. I look like an idiot now, so thanks, lads. Keith Dalton in particular was on fire for Cabo, so hey, maybe they could challenge this year. Wexford drew 1-1 with UCD. It's a fairly uplifting result after a promising yet mysterious off-season, so fair play, lads. I hope you can push on. Longford versus Rovers 2, as we have to call them. They're not Rovers B. I was not expecting Rovers to field a team that strong. Like, that is a seriously strong team with the likes of Brendan Kavanagh and Thomas Alua. This could seriously upset the balance of the first division when I look at it, but it must have been nice for Longford to beat the team they so thoroughly opposed with a convincing display. And the last game was one I admittedly didn't get around to seeing too much of. Drogheda beat Cove 2-0 in Cove. A fair result by the sounds of things, but I wouldn't worry too much for Cove. It's early days and all. Before I get into the Premier Division, I'll give my first division predictions. First game, Shamrock Rovers 2 versus Galway United. So my predicted champions opened their campaign away to Rovers 2, with last week's game against Athlone being called off due to a waterlogged pitch. It looks like Rovers 2 would be a lot tougher than I thought, with the likes of Brandon Kavanagh playing for them. Still, I picked Galway as the champions for a reason, and I think they're going to win here. I predict the score, Shamrock Rovers 2, 1. God, that's so fucking stupid to say. Galway United 2. Drogheda United versus Longford Town. Already we have a big matchup in the first division with two promotion chasing teams going at it. Longford were hugely impressive in their 1-0 win at home to Rovers 2, while Drogheda picked up a solid away win against Cove. This game could go either way, but I think that home field advantage could see Drogheda eke this one out. So full time score, Drogheda 3, Longford 2. UCD versus Cove Ramblers. I really don't know where either of these teams lie at the moment, to be honest. While Colin Whelan was impressive for UCD last week, the rest of the team didn't back him up very well. Cove had a tough loss, but against a very good team. I think this one could be a stalemate. Full time score, UCD 0, Cove Ramblers 0. Bray Wanderers versus Wexford FC. Bray definitely didn't have an ideal start, a far cry from what I predicted. Wexford, on the other hand, had a decent start. And the expectations are non-existent for the squad, so it does give them the freedom to experiment and play freely. Bray will be looking to challenge for promotion, and last week's loss will hurt big time. I don't like to say this, but I think Bray will have to wait another week for their first win. Predicted score, Bray Wanderers 1, Wexford FC 1. Athlone Town versus Cabinteely. Athlone get their season up and running against what looks like a strong Cabinteely side. The first game the squad will play together, you could at least argue that it's easier than Galway away. Still, growing pains will hurt Athlone as Cabo continue their fine start. Predicted score, Athlone Town 0, Cabinteely 2. Now on to the Premier Division. There's one really obvious place to start, and I mean really obvious. But let's start with some good news. Shell sold out Tulka Park in their first game back in the top flight since 2013. Paying fans even got to watch a fight break out between the stewards, so everyone got their money's worth. Shells will be disappointed not to have won that one, but they gave a good account of themselves. Waterford endured 2-0 loss at home to Bohemians, but having been at that game, I have to say there wasn't much between the sides. Give me credit where credit is due, both took full advantage of the 5 minutes before half time where they were on top, and I found officiating to be questionable at best. It's nice to see Danny Mandrew back after what was a supposedly turbulent off-season. Speaking as a fan, the result was tough to take, but a little more than a disappointment. Conditions were rough and the teams knew better times are definitely in store for the Blues. Some might doubt this kind of optimism after Monday night, a 2-0 loss to Rovers that could have and probably should have been a lot worse, and indeed that was a hard one to watch, but Waterford are for another video. Sligo haven't been having a great start to the season, but I think it was a bit harsh with my pre-season assessment. Despite key losses, Sligo have held on to enough players and added just barely enough that they should pick up a few points here and there. And I don't have time to talk about this in this video because it happened so late in the week. But Ryan De Vries, I believe, has signed for them. So yeah, we'll be talking about that. And of course, Finn Harps will sign a player as well. So I'll talk about that next week. St. Pat's recovered excellently from their opening day slip to beat Sligo on Friday. And Chris Forrester in particular was exceptional. I would have said before he left Pat's the first time to go to Peterborough United in England, that he was destined to make the national team, but it's not too late for Forrester if he plays like this. Adverse weather and pitch inspection claimed 2 of Monday's games, which is a shame since I was looking forward to talking about both of those. Finn Harps versus Shelburne and St. Pat's versus Derry City. They'll have to be played on March the 16th. I think that's the right date. Cork, it's been a baptism of fire for Cork. Dundalk and Rovers away in the space of 3 days for them is hardly fair, but to have started the season with 0 goals scored and 10 conceded, I'm extremely worried. Heads clearly dropped after Rover's second goal, and Deshane Dowling's sending off doesn't bode well. Listen, I'm a Blues fan first and foremost, and there's no better feeling than beating Cork and reminding them of their place. But as much as that's true, the Premier Division, and Waterford in particular, are better off with Cork in it rather than out of it. Right now, Neil Fenn seems to have an impossible job in his hands. Talking about on-the-field issues for a minute, the amount of loan signings is extremely worrying. When these players go back in June, they'll be back to square one trying to get a new squad to gel like Waterford were last season, only arguably worse. The Blues lost 3 key players in Aaron Ryan and Izzy Akinada, and most importantly Bastian Erie. But at that stage they still had Rory Feely, Shane Duggan, Zach Elbazetti and Georgie Poynton among others who helped the club stick together. I don't see where the leadership will come from once those signings go. Alan Bennett clearly isn't part of Fenn's plans, and without him there's a lack of leadership on the field. Garrod Morrissey by many accounts hasn't filled the role of captain well, and it looks like City will be forced to rely on what is basically their under-19s. Corey Galvin is a player who I would have tipped to start for Cork this season, but that isn't the case obviously. Fair enough, he can't play the whole 90 minutes because of his style of play, but he can score incredible goals. Surely he's worth a look. Off the field, the situation appears worse. Money that saw Kieran Sadlier, Barry McNamee, Carl Shepherd, Conor McCormick and Graham Cummins playing for the club in previous years has dried up. Any money from the sell-on clauses of Sean Maguire and Alan Brown, both of which were potentially worth millions, have gone for 600,000 to keep the club afloat. I don't know what's going on at Forest. Some stories are coming out that someone has their hand in the till, some stories say that volunteers are being disrespected. I really don't know what's going on, but it all points to Cork going out of business, and that's not good either. As I was writing this, I recently read an article from Off the Ball that said that Cork were 2 hours away from the deadline of getting their SSE Electricity League Premier Division licence. If that had happened, they would have literally gone out of business right then and there. If they were that close, that is an extremely dangerous sign. If Cork go bust, it'll be the second time in 10 years, and it means a trip back down to the First Division. I love chanting about there being only one team in Munster, but no Premier Division football for Cork or Limerick means that Waterford will be the only team in the province playing Premier Division football. Not an ideal situation by any means, and I can only hope it improves. There are banking on Sligo and Harps having a bad start. But as I mentioned, Sligo will improve, and Harps... Let's look at the 3 unbeaten teams in the league so far. Shamrock Rovers, Dundalk and Finn Harps? Yeah, holy shit. Finn Harps have been the surprise package this year. Many people's favourites to go down for, to be fair, seemingly obvious reasons. But wow. Ollie Horgan may be negative in his interviews, but Harps have proven to be a much improved team from last season. It remains to be seen what impact Cameron Saul will have, but Harps have assembled a decent defence, so that with the capture of David Webster from St. Pat's and Sean Kelly from Limerick being 2 good signings at centre back, as well as that Kosovar Siddiqui on loan from Hibs is a fucking unit of a man, like holy shit. But the key to Harps' defence is not any defender, but their goalkeeper, Mark McGinley. Mark McGinley was Harps' Player of the Year last season, and it was easy to see why. For when he started playing in the middle of the season to the end, he kept the Donegal side in a lot of games. This season he has picked up where he left off, with Harps having conceded just once so far, a scrappy late goal in Derry. But the biggest area of improvement, and the key to Harps' success this season, has been the midfield. The injury to Mark Timlin was a tough one to take, and you can imagine how good they'd be if he was fit. The signing of Ryan Connolly and, of course, Barry McNamee are what have set Harps apart this season. McNamee in particular is what many Cork fans were hoping Garrod Morrissey would have been. He has taken charge of the midfield, allowing the talented Connolly to cause problems for opposing defences. I know this run will come to an end, but honestly, Harps feel like they could be the feel-good story this year. In a season where they were written off as no-hopers, Harps have turned to their communities for support, and they've got it. They've actually got the money from the community to sign some of these players, so that's impressive. And it looks like their new stadium might be getting funding back as well, so hey, things are looking up in Ballybuffet. So getting into my team of the week, we have on goal Brian Murphy for a second week in a row. Some people might say I'm biased, I just say find a better keeper for me, because Brian Murphy was definitely a huge player for Waterford. In the 2 games they had this week, he certainly kept the scorelines a lot more respectable than they otherwise should have been, especially against Shamrock Rovers. So yeah, while he didn't win a game for his team this week, he certainly had a hand in making sure their goal difference wasn't minus 25 by the end of week 2. In defence, we're playing a 3-man defence with one player who isn't a defender. First off, let's start with the actual defenders though. Andy Boyle, he kept Shell's attack quiet pretty much all night in Tulka Park, and deserves to be commended for that. There's not much else I can say. It's kind of hard to talk about defenders. I mean, I suppose I was a defender when I played, so you know, I mean, I have a bit of kindred brethrenship. Is that what they say? I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Second of 3 defenders is Roberto Lopez of Shamrock Rovers. This is hugely influenced by his performance on Monday night. Obviously, he must have been quite sound defensively on Friday night as well for him to have conceded no goals. But it was particularly on Monday I thought he did quite well neutralising the Waterford attack. Now, having said that, the Blues didn't offer up much in attack, in fairness, but he was certainly strong and in command of the game, and for that, he earned the spot in my team of the week. The third defender, and this one isn't a defender, it's Gary Deegan of Shelburne. I just figured I could drop him back. Since he appeared to be playing quite deep for most of the game against Dundalk, he ended up scoring a goal as well, so he led Shells quite well, I thought, and the game was certainly very close because of his efforts. So yeah, Gary Deegan earns a spot in out of position, but he is in the team of the week. Starting off with wingbacks, and the first wingback I'm going to have is Reece Marshall at left wingback, and Marshall was simply fantastic on Monday night against the Blues, scoring an unbelievable goal there in, I believe, the 26th minute, but I could be wrong there. Anyway, it was early enough in the game, and he was just phenomenal. He was able to attack, he could defend well as well. He looks like everything that they were hyping him up to be at Glenavon, so Rovers appear to have got yet another quality player on their team. Moving on to the other wing back, this one is yet again another out of position player, but I'm going to put Chris Forrester here. Chris Forrester is more of a midfielder, so I can understand people who might not approve of me putting him here. I could put Ronan Finn here as well, but I just felt that Chris Forrester would suit this better. He was obviously exceptional against Sligo. He scored a brilliant goal, showed excellent footwork. Almost had another goal, tried to lob Ed McGinty, but that didn't quite work out. Still though, the work ethic and the commitment he showed, I thought were impressive on their own, but the fact that he has a goal as well certainly sweetens the deal and lands him a place in this team of the week. Moving on to the three-man midfield, first of three is Barry McNamee of Finn Harps. Just by far Harps' best player on the night against Derry. Took control of the game himself. Tony and Ryan Connolly were all great for midfield in Harps. I suppose there's not much I can say. Barry McNamee on his return to the Brandywell. If this is his first performance for Finn Harps, they certainly have a lot to look forward to as the season goes on, because things are only going to get better from here, or at least you'd hope they would. Then moving on to our other midfielders, the first is Jack Byrne, and this was kind of an obvious one. This is one I fall back on when I don't have anything else to do. Jack Byrne, there's really not a lot I can say. He just created a lot of chances. Cork were a lot of times very poor in defending, but it's a good midfielder that will dissect that, and a poor midfielder who won't always recognise that. And so Jack Byrne, I suppose he does, in fairness, earn a place in this team. Then we move on to the third midfielder, Keith Dalton. The first division player in any of these teams. You can certainly put a lot of other players here, but I think that Keith Dalton earns this place simply for just being on fire for Cavan Teely in their first division game against Bray at the weekend. It was a Friday. It was Friday, yes. Okay, my apologies. Then moving on to the two up front, the first is Walter Figueira. I'm going to talk about the next one in a minute, and I've saved him for last because he's a player of the week, and I think I could do 2 and 1 there. But the first player I'm going to talk about before I get on to any of that is Walter Figueira. So Walter Figueira, front man for Derry City. I thought he created a lot of problems for Finn Harps. He was by far the brightest spark on the field for Derry. Tim Nielsen did have a lot of chances, but I just don't feel like he took them very well. So I'm not going to write him off. I'm just thinking that it's potentially it's just potentially early days yet. Anyway, Figueira of course set up the winner, or not the winner, the equaliser for Derry City against Harps, and I don't have the script by the way. And as well as that, he was just a really good dribbler of the ball. Held it up well for other players to get past him, and just really looks like he's going to be every bit as good as he was for Waterford up at the Brandywell. So enjoy him, Derry, and take good care of him. And now we move on to the player of the week, and really there was no one else. I like that it's been very easy for the first 2 weeks to pick a player of the week, but no one else could compete with 5 goals in one game. That's another thing. Graham Burke only played 1 game. I've said his name. Graham Burke obviously is my player of the week and the second striker in this team. So you could put him anywhere really. You could put him out in the wing. You could put him as a second striker and attacking midfielder. You could put him anywhere, but I've chose to put him up front here with Walter Figueira just because he scored 5 goals. Now, in fairness, Cork City's defence, as I said, wasn't very easy to pick, or wasn't very hard to pick apart, I should say. But Graham Burke certainly had a field day. And looking at the quality of finishing he produced, it was certainly enough to warrant those 5 goals. He's going to be a big loss for Rovers now heading into the Dundalk game. He is injured, but Graham Burke looks like he's going to have a blockbuster season like he did 2 years ago when he was first with Rovers. And I look forward to seeing him playing against teams other than Waterford when he comes down here. Not really looking forward to that, because we would have been torn apart if he was down here on the Monday night. Luckily for us, he wasn't. But yeah, that's the gist of it. The bench is up there as well if you want to have a look. But anyway, that leaves only one thing now to cover before the end of the video, and that is, of course, the predictions. For the Premier Division, there's 5 games on this week. We're not seeing any more Monday games for a while, but that's something. Anyway, Shamrock Rovers versus Dundalk, and I have to start with this one. This matchup is the matchup of the season so far. The 2 favourites to go head to head in Tala, on RT, by the way, if you want to watch that, in what could probably decide where the league ends up. Both teams clearly had this in their mind on Monday, and yeah, they were playing very complacently. It promises to be an excellent game at a packed Tala Stadium. Right now it's hard to put anything between the teams except goal difference, ironic considering Rovers striker woes. Rory Gaffney will look to plug that gap, but even if he succeeds, I think it will take time. That being said, the home crowd could spur the Hoops on to victory. While it didn't last season, Rovers have improved since then, and I think this will just be enough for them to barely edge the contest. Shamrock Rovers 2, Dundalk 1. Move on to Cork City versus Finn Harps. Cork have a chance to get 3 points on the board here against Harps, and they will look at it that way. But the way Harps are playing, it might not be that easy. The Donegal side picked up a point at Turner's Cross last season, and given that this side has improved since then and is playing well at the moment, it might be enough to get a win. Cork losing this game seems really, really far-fetched, but I think they just might. Predicted score: Cork City 0, Finn Harps 1. Sligo Rovers versus Waterford FC. After the 1-0 win away to Pats, Waterford have shown that for all their talent, they are still a new team getting to know one another. They'll be missing an important piece of their team in Andre Burley, who is suspended, but Sligo will continue to miss Danny Kane and John Mahon, 2 very important defenders for them through injury. That being said, Waterford's tactics appear route 1 and extremely simple, which will make Sligo tough to break down. New signing Ryan De Vries will look to make an immediate impact at the showgrounds, but after 2 rough games for the Blues, I'm predicting they'll bounce back this week. Predicted score: Sligo Rovers 0, Waterford 1. Shelburne versus St Patrick's Athletic. This one should be good. After Bowes Rovers, this is the most intense Dublin derby. It's just that Shells haven't been up for so long that people might have forgotten about it. But make no mistake, I can see tempers flaring in this game. Pats have a very talented squad, as evidenced by last week's win over Sligo. But will it be enough this time? Shells held Dundalk to a 2-1 win, which suggests as close as it was. So, with all things considered here, I'm going to have to call a draw here to be safe. Shelburne 2, St Patrick's Athletic 2. Final game: Derry City versus Bohemians. Derry had a concerning start to the season. Last week's last gap equaliser against Finn Harps at the Brandywell, was not what many would have envisioned as being the only goal Derry have scored so far this season. They faced a tough Bow squad, loaded with talent and off the back of consecutive 2-0 wins. However, the extra day's rest and talent finally getting to know each other may just be enough to net all 3 points for the Candy Stripes in this game. Predicted scoreline 3-1 to Derry City. So that concludes this week of League of Ireland Roundup. I've been the man with the plan. Thank you for watching the videos. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. So until then guys, I will see you then.